Let loose. Are the girls ready? I asked with a hint of impatience as I stood at the familiar doorstep, now belonging solely to my ex-wife, to collect my daughters, aged 13 and 12, for our weekend together. Almost ready. How are you doing? My ex-wife responded with a tone that sounded somewhat caring. I only have them 2 weekends a month. Please, let's keep it punctual, I replied curtly, dismissing her attempt at small talk. Sam, I do try, but you know how girls are at this age. You can keep them a bit longer to make up for the delay. Are you all right, though? She persisted. I'll wait in the car, I said sharply, turning away to leave. Her voice trailed off as I walked away, a familiar dance of her trying to ease her conscience and me, brushing off her efforts. About 5 minutes later, Karen and Wendy burst out of the house, their overnight bags in tow. Their apologies instantly dissolved my frustration. Despite my attempts to stay annoyed, it was impossible to hold on to that feeling with them around. Pauline had a point. Managing time with young girls is no easy task, and my frustration never lingered long around them. With only a couple of days together, I always aimed to make our time special, avoiding the mundane and focusing on creating memorable experiences. As they updated me on their recent activities, I braced myself to share some exciting news. I had finally saved enough to buy them the new Nintendo game system they'd been longing for. I was eager to see their excitement and share in the joy of purchasing it together. However, my enthusiasm deflated when Karen casually mentioned, "That's okay, Daddy. Dave already got us one, along with several games." Instantly, my disappointment turned to annoyance. Dave, my ex's new partner, had stepped in first. If I thought I was at my wit's end before, this just added to my frustration. Let me explain. Dave, my once closest friend since our high school days, was just your average guy, albeit with more success in his professional life than his personal one. He wasn't the type to play around, he simply hadn't found the right partner. We'd met some of his dates, decent people, but none really matched him. He was like an uncle to my kids, fondly called Uncle Dave, and my wife, Pauline, had her own close friend, Aunt Daphne. They were tight-knit, almost like family, and I trusted them implicitly. I had no inkling anything was amiss in my marriage. Our relationship seemed solid, our interactions harmonious, and we spent ample time together. One Friday night, however, my world turned upside down. Pauline said the kids were away for the weekend, and I anticipated a romantic surprise from her. Instead, she dropped a bombshell. She and Dave had fallen in love, and divorce papers were on their way. She insisted their relationship hadn't become physical, but at that point, it hardly mattered. She planned to stay with Dave and wanted me out of the house. I refused to leave, but I was blindsided by a court order evicting me, granting her temporary custody of our children and our home. No accusations of wrongdoing were made against me. It was just a legal maneuver. During the divorce proceedings, I was admittedly difficult, making exorbitant demands like the house, full custody of the kids, and substantial child support. It prolonged the process, but eventually, the threat of legal repercussions for wasting the court's time made me relent. Since our incomes were similar, I didn't owe alimony, but child support took a significant chunk out of my budget. I lived frugally, saving to provide enjoyable weekends with my daughters, including saving for a video game system. Looking back, I could see Pauline tried to keep things civil, but I was too embittered to appreciate it. In my eyes, she had everything, a new partner and a comfortable life, while I struggled financially and saw my kids only 4 days a month. The financial dynamics had changed significantly. Pauline and I were managing well with our combined incomes, but after our separation, the equation shifted. Now, it was her salary plus Dave's, which was notably higher than mine, in addition to the child support I provided. This new arrangement allowed them a more comfortable lifestyle, while I found myself adjusting to a more modest way of living. The transition was swift. Pauline and Dave tied the knot a mere 2 months post-divorce. What really hit me hard was the reaction of our daughters. I had braced myself for some resistance, maybe a bit of defiance, or the classic "you're not my dad" scenario. Yet, the girls seemed to accept the changes with ease. Dave wasn't new to them, he had been around for quite a while. His move into our old house, and more specifically, into what used to be our shared space, didn't seem to bother them. In fact, they appeared rather thrilled about having 2 homes, just like some of their friends. As Pauline and Dave neared their first anniversary, I hadn't exchanged a friendly word with either of them, barring necessary communication about our daughters. And now, hearing my children refer to Dave as Daddy was a tough pill to swallow. I remember one weekend, as I was dropping the girls off, I managed to keep my composure, but inside I was fuming. After a quick goodbye to my daughters, who were eager to play with their new video game console, Pauline greeted me at the door. "I need to talk to you," I said, perhaps with a hint of anger in my tone. Pauline followed me outside, closing the door behind her. "What's wrong, Sam?" I couldn't hold back. "Why are they calling him Daddy Dave? They have one father, and that's me. So, what's this all about?" Pauline explained. "Well, the girls felt odd calling him Uncle Dave after we got married. It seemed strange in public. We thought about just Dave, but that didn't feel right either. So, we all decided on Daddy Dave." "And who came up with that idea?" I pressed. "I think it was my suggestion, but the girls liked it." I knew you might not be thrilled, but they were sure you'd understand. Sam, please don't blow this out of proportion. You don't get to decide how I should feel about this, Paulin. You don't have to experience them calling someone else mom. It's hard, especially when it's the person who turned our lives upside down. He didn't. Paulin started, but I wasn't in the mood to listen. The whole situation just seemed so unfair and complicated. What's the deal with the video games? You knew perfectly well I wanted to get those for them, but then Dave goes out and buys them. What's that all about? We just thought they'd been waiting a while and we weren't sure when you'd manage it. We just wanted the girls to enjoy the games. Yeah, and make me look bad in the process. Sam, it's not like that. Oh, of course. Let's show how amazing Dave is and what a failure their real dad is, right? Oh, I left him and married someone wealthy, and now we've got all this money, while their dad struggles to make ends meet. But hey, we can just splash out on whatever they want. It's not like that at all. I think it's exactly like that. You're unbelievable. I stormed back to my car and sped away from the house, not looking back. I was so furious I worried about what I might do, and a life sentence for anything rash was definitely not in my plans. Things continued awkwardly for the next couple of years. If Paulin and Dave hoped for a thaw in our relationship or a softening of my anger, they were mistaken. They tried to talk to me many times, mostly about my life and how they hoped I'd overcome my anger, but I only paid attention to matters regarding my daughters. Since my marriage ended, I hadn't been in any relationships. A few reasons for that. Firstly, I was tight on money despite a few raises. Secondly, I had grown distrustful of women, so I kept things to fleeting encounters, knowing they wouldn't lead anywhere. And lastly, I was still seething about what had happened, aware that I wasn't in the right state for a serious relationship. Angry and broke isn't exactly appealing. The thought of seeking counseling never crossed my mind. The tipping point came on the first weekend of June. School was over and I was eager for a summer weekend with my daughters. Karen was a mature 15 and Wendy a delightful 14. I cherished every moment with them. Are the girls ready? I asked as Paulin opened the door, a routine we'd had for years. They're not here, Sam, Paulin said, her face showing confusion. What do you mean they're not here? My voice rose in frustration. They went to the beach with the Finley family for the week. They left this afternoon. They emailed you about it last week. Yeah, and I emailed back saying this was my weekend with them. How could you let them go? It wasn't my place to stop them. No, why miss a chance to complicate my life further? You're overreacting. I'll talk to them when they return, I said, walking away again. That week was a haze of anger, hurt, and frustration. I still only had 4 days a month with them, plus a few extra for special occasion, and I didn't want to lose any of those. If only I had known. The following Friday night, I returned to the house to discuss their departure during my weekend. Since the divorce, I'd only been inside a few times, always at my daughter's request. I entered, preferring to have this conversation indoors. In the living room, Paulin and Dave watched from the kitchen. I wondered if they anticipated what was about to happen. The girls were there, and I tried to stay calm as I sat opposite them. Mom said you wanted to talk about us going to the beach with the Finleys. Karen began. I replied to your email, reminding you it was my weekend, and I expected you to be here. Dad, I was just informing you. I wasn't asking for permission. What? I raised my voice. You're not even 16. How can you make such decisions without parental consent? I had Mom's consent. She knows the Finleys and agreed as long as I informed you. And you thought just emailing me was enough. Come on, Dad. I'm 15 now. We're not little anymore. We're growing up, wanting to spend time with friends. I thought you'd get that. I barely see you as it is. Are you saying you prefer hanging out with friends over spending time with me? Dad, it's just that we're older now and want to be with our friends. I can't expect them to plan around your visitation days. There's always something happening on weekends, pool parties, beach outings. We're hardly ever home. I realized my daughters were hinting they'd rather be with friends than with me, avoiding saying it outright. It felt like a deep wound, and I had to accept this phase of my life was ending. The anger I felt was replaced by a profound sadness at the thought of losing my connection with my girls. I didn't want them to see how much it hurt, so I tried to stay strong. So, are you saying you want to stop the weekend visits? I thought I heard Paulin gasp, but the girls didn't seem to notice. We're just really busy, Dad. You must remember what that's like. It doesn't mean we don't love you. That's exactly how it felt. Just 4 days a month, and even that was too much. They had their mom and their stepdad most of the time. It seemed like there was no room for me anymore. I hadn't expected my role as a father to diminish while they were still teenagers, but it seemed it had. All right, girls, I understand. We'll stop the visitation, and you guys go have fun. They both got up and hugged me. Thanks, Dad. We knew you'd understand. They rushed off to their rooms. It didn't seem to matter much anymore. They didn't realize the impact of their words on me. My role in their lives seemed to have vanished. I stood up, heading for the door. Paulin came over. You okay, Sam? I tried to compose myself, though I doubt I did it well. I attempted to smile, despite how I felt inside. All right, let's calm down. You know, this might actually be a good thing for me. I have a friend in North Carolina who's been asking me to join him for quite some time. As I walked towards the door, it seemed like it took a moment for Pauline to grasp what I had just said. She quickly closed the distance and grabbed my shoulder to spin me around. Hold on, Sam. Are you actually saying you're moving to North Carolina? Yeah, why not? It's clear as day, isn't it? They don't need me here, haven't for a long time, especially with you around. And now, they clearly don't even want me. This is just the final piece of what you started, Pauline. There's nothing left for me here, no one who needs me. You pushed me away, and now they have too. You're their family now. I'm out. Congratulations, you've got what you wanted. I felt my eyes start to sting with tears. I had to leave that place. The last thing I wanted was to break down right there, in front of the two people who turned my life upside down. I rushed out the front door towards my car, struggling to get the key in the lock. Maybe the tears were blurring my vision. Sam, wait, came Dave's voice from behind, followed by his hand on my shoulder. I didn't say anything. Instead, I spun around and punched him as hard as I could. He stumbled but didn't fall. I had been waiting a long time to do that. Pauline hurried over to check on him while I finally managed to find the right key. Sam, please, don't do this. The kids are just going through a phase. They still love and need you, even if they don't realize it now. Leaving will hurt them. What do you expect me to do, Polly? Sit in my small apartment, hoping for a chance to see my daughters? Or be their last resort if they have no other plans? It won't be like that, Sam. But it will. You heard them. The only thing I was looking forward to was their visits, and now that's gone. You'll break their hearts. I doubt that. But even if it's true, at least I won't be the only one hurting. Sam, you saw how relieved they were to not have to visit me anymore. Honestly, I doubt they'll even miss me, at least not for a while. Sam, please don't leave things like this. I never wanted any of this. Perhaps, but it's irrelevant now. We might cross paths again in the future. I managed to unlock and open the car door. Dave had picked himself up, and they both stood there, trying to look remorseful, but I had my doubts about their sincerity. I settled into the driver's seat, hesitating before shutting the door. Casting one final glance at them, I said, "Look after my girls." They acknowledged with a slight nod, watching as I pulled away. I wondered if they'd mention anything to the girls. I hoped not. I didn't want them feeling obligated to spend time with me. It seemed it was time for us to go our separate ways. The toughest part about a family falling apart is the loss of shared dreams. Pauline and I often dreamed about growing old together, having our kids and their kids visit, celebrating holidays, all of it. The end of our marriage meant the end of these dreams for me. But I was still hoping to be there for their graduations, weddings, and meet my grandchildren. Now, that seemed unlikely. Maybe there would be a chance to reconnect with my daughters, but it felt like this was the final chapter. I reached out to my friend, Tim, who had a job offer for me. It was a significant pay raise, and I planned to continue providing child support. They might not need it, but it was my way of staying connected to my daughters and fulfilling my responsibilities. I didn't want to be close yet feel distant, but that didn't mean I stopped loving them or wanting to support them. I hadn't been completely honest about Tim's offer in North Carolina. He hadn't been actively recruiting me, but had mentioned he'd have a job for me if I ever needed one. Now was the time to accept that offer. My apartment lease had a clause for job relocation, requiring a 30-day notice, so I had Tim send over the necessary documentation. I'd already paid the final month's rent and told them to keep the security deposit instead of me cleaning the place. I packed my belongings into my car, which, sadly, didn't even fill it, and set off. I drove nonstop, eager to start anew. The loneliness in my car reminded me of the pain of my daughter's absence. Arriving in Durham under a rainy sky seemed symbolic. Tim's home services business had a position ready for me. I started with general home repair and pest control, and Tim suggested I train in electrical and plumbing work, which I considered. Tim had never settled down, always moving from one girlfriend to the next. He had a mix of partners, some stunning and others more ordinary. None of them seemed to view Tim as a long-term prospect, but they were drawn to his wealth and his love for lively gatherings. This lifestyle seemed to agree with Tim perfectly. Meanwhile, I was engrossed in my job, which kept me occupied during the day. However, nights were tougher, and I found myself drinking more than usual, often waking up in my apartment still in yesterday's clothes, reeking of alcohol. It was my way of coping. By the time I freshened up and changed, I'd feel a bit better, so I didn't see any pressing need to alter my routine. It eased my pain, and I didn't notice any immediate consequences, although I suspected my liver was under strain. A few weeks later, Tim threw his annual 4th of July bash. He had a spacious house with a large backyard, perfect for his parties. We planned to set off fireworks in the evening that he had bought from a nearby stand. The day was filled with drinks, dance, swimming, and a bit of volleyball. I spent most of the time drinking and watching the guests, especially the women in their swimsuits. My memory of the evening is hazy due to the alcohol, but I ended up spending time with a tall blonde, let's call her Melanie. She was quite attractive with long hair, slender, and didn't seem to care for certain undergarments. We got intimate that night, the first time I had been with someone since my last relationship. We spent the night together, and I was grateful for Tim's well-stocked house. The next morning, I woke up alone and physically fine, but my thoughts soon turned to more melancholic matters. It had been nearly a month since I'd heard from my daughters. Tim's parties turned out to be a monthly occurrence, each themed around a holiday. August, lacking any notable holidays, didn't stop Tim. He invented August days on the second Saturday of the month, just another excuse for a celebration. My drinking habits hadn't gotten any better. In fact, you might say I'd become quite skilled at it. So, there I was again, thoroughly inebriated. Melanie, or whatever her name was, wasn't there this time, which was a bit of a letdown. Not that I had any special feelings for her, that wasn't the case at all. I was just hoping for a similar encounter to the one we had last month, given that she was a familiar face. I suppose I'm reasonably attractive because I still ended up spending the night with someone. Roberta, her name was, with long reddish-brown hair that shimmered with hints of red in the sunlight. She had a fuller figure, with a slight belly, but a notable backside. She seemed quite content with my company, as would probably be the case with anyone in my position. My time with her was enjoyable, although I got the feeling she wasn't exactly exclusive, given her rather relaxed demeanor. I'm pretty sure I passed out afterward, and just like with Melanie, she had left by the time I woke up. Tim, always the good friend, fed me breakfast before I headed home to sulk in my own company. This became a repeating pattern over the next few months. As my drinking escalated, which I hadn't thought possible, my memory of the people I met and spent time with started to fade. The woman I met on Labor Day had blonde hair and an attention-grabbing figure, though she didn't seem particularly engaging. She appeared content to just be there, as if her looks alone were a privilege for me. On Halloween, the party had a masquerade theme, so it was hard to tell much about anyone, even without the alcohol. The woman I was with wore a Wonder Woman costume. I think she was a brunette. For Veterans Day, Tim threw another party. It was just a few weeks after Halloween, but nobody seemed to mind. With Thanksgiving approaching, my first without my daughters, I found myself drinking heavily. I have vague memories of being intimate with someone, but the details are blurry. I remember waking up at night, finding a woman beside me in the dark, and we were together again, but she was gone by morning. All I recall is that she had an appealing figure. Finally, I heard from my daughters around Thanksgiving, but it wasn't what I had hoped for. I was waiting for them to realize that no plans had been made at my new out-of-state residence. Previously, we would split the day, alternating each year. This year, it was supposed to be my turn for the latter part of the day. About a week before the holiday, Karen called, not to discuss plans or to express regret for the distance that had grown between us. Instead, she just wanted to tell me they were invited to go shopping with the Finleys and asked if we could skip our Thanksgiving visit this year. It seemed they still thought I lived close by and were just too caught up in their own lives to visit. Thanksgiving was a solitary affair. I found myself alone in a hotel room, seeking solace in a bottle. Tim had extended an invitation to his place, but the thought of mingling with a crowd, none of whom were family, was too much to bear. I chose a hotel, intentionally hiding away, half expecting, yet avoiding, any attempts from friends to draw me out of my self-imposed isolation. When I awoke the next day, my phone was flooded with texts, missed calls, and voicemails. Most were from Tim, persistently trying to coax me into joining his festive gathering. I also had a message from my daughter Karen's phone, a cheerful happy Thanksgiving from her and Wendy, along with a thank you for some holiday shopping. Then there was the last call, from Pauline. A part of me dreaded listening to her message, yet curiosity won over. Her voice came through, tinged with an awkward concern. "Sam, it's Pauline. We haven't talked in a while, and I thought that's what you preferred. But holidays can be tough, especially when you're away from family, so I just wanted to check on you. I'm aware the girls called. They don't realize you've moved yet. Remember, they're just kids, caught up in their own worlds. They still love you deeply. I know you might not want to hear from me, but could you just let me know you're safe? A simple email or text would suffice. I'm truly sorry for how things turned out. That's all, really. Please, just let me know you're okay." I promptly deleted all the texts and emails, but I did send Pauline a brief message to assure her of my well-being, though being alive didn't necessarily mean being okay. It was the easier option compared to what might unfold if I remained silent. I wasn't in the mood for anything else, so I opened another beer. It wouldn't erase the pain, but it offered a temporary reprieve, and that was enough for the moment. The following weeks were a blur. If I wasn't working, I was drowning in my sorrows, often losing consciousness. Miraculously, I managed to stay sober just enough to function at work, though it was a narrow margin. As Christmas and New Year's loomed, my first without my daughters, a deep depression took hold. In my mind, no one had ever suffered as I was, despite knowing others had faced much worse. That knowledge didn't alleviate the sense of unparalleled despair that enveloped me. The long-awaited phone call I had been anticipating for the past month finally arrived. Initially, it was a call from the girls, which I chose not to answer. They were inquiring about our Christmas plans. Since the divorce, we had taken turns celebrating Christmas Eve and Christmas Day with them. This year, it was my turn for Christmas Eve, and they left a message confirming that. I spent a few days gathering my emotions to return their call, bracing myself for the inevitable confrontation that had been simmering for the last 6 months. However, a call from Pauline unexpectedly changed my plans. She sounded upset in her voicemail. "Sam, it's Pauline. I'm hoping you just missed the girl's message, not that you're ignoring it. I had to tell them you'd moved away. Predictably, they're deeply upset. They always thought they could see you whenever they wanted, and learning that's no longer possible has hit them hard. I hope you realize the pain this is causing them. I'm sorry to say this, Sam, but I don't feel confident about you being with them right now. I know you'd never harm them physically, but it seems you're hurting them emotionally, maybe to get back at me for my mistakes. I was considering suggesting a visit to you, but I'm not comfortable with that now. Please, Sam, think of the impact on them. Don't let your anger towards me ruin your bond with them. They're teenagers, with all the typical thoughts and emotions of their age. You can call me anytime to discuss this or anything else. Merry Christmas, Sam. In frustration, I vented aloud, though no one was there to hear. I downed a couple more beers and then, impulsively, called her back. Sam, I retorted, my words blurred by my inebriation. How dare you threaten to keep me from seeing my kids when I'm already struggling to do so? Sam, have you been drinking? Yeah, I'm quite drunk. You shouldn't drink so much, Sam. It's not healthy. Not healthy. What does it matter to you? You've already stripped away everything important to me. Why should you care what happens to me now? I do care about you, Sam. Yeah, your care was really evident when you betrayed me with Dave. And how you let the kids distance themselves from me too, I said bitterly. I didn't. Stop it, Pauline. Just stop. You took them away on my weekends, making it clear they didn't need to see me. You're deceitful, and you've shown no concern for me at all. I could hear the frustration in my voice. I heard her take a deep breath on the other end. Sam, you're upset and intoxicated, so I'm not going to argue now. Let's talk when you're sober, okay? And who are you to judge me, after what you've done? Cheating on me, forcing me out, and then taking everything I had. You really have some nerve, Pauline. Pauline, but she had already hung up. I spent Christmas alone, mostly in bed, trying to distract myself with sports on TV. But the constant Christmas reminders only deepened my gloom, leading me to drink even more. I dozed off during a Lakers game, briefly amused by their loss, then drifted back to sleep. At Tim's service company, we didn't get much time off, even during the holidays. Tim had secured a contract to refurbish a foreclosed house that had been trashed by its previous owners. A bunch of us were there, including plumbers and electricians. I was tasked with some drywall work, and the atmosphere was surprisingly light and jovial. It was a refreshing change. In the past few months, working with others had felt awkward. They seemed reserved, maybe due to my friendship with Tim. But this group was different, and I appreciated the sense of camaraderie. Mid-morning, I noticed Tim's truck pulling up. He got out, accompanied by another guy I vaguely recognized but couldn't name. They greeted the crew cheerfully as they entered, then made their way over to me. Hey Sam, can we chat for a sec? Of course, Tim. Always got time for the boss, I quipped, hoping to get a chuckle from the crew. They did, but Tim barely cracked a smile. Let's step outside, he said, already heading for the door. I knew I was meant to follow. Outside, the others gave us space, clearly understanding the need for privacy. How's it going, Sam? He asked. About as good as it gets, I replied, trying to gauge his intent. That's good. You haven't been drinking today, have you? Just my usual evening routine for the past few months, I joked, trying to lighten the mood. Tim gave a half-hearted chuckle, but his expression was serious. I mean today, Sam. No, Tim, not today. That's what I hoped to hear. But do me a solid, will you? Breathe into this. He held out a compact device. I eyed it suspiciously. What's that? A breathalyzer. Just to be sure, you know. I glanced around. The others were watching discreetly. It dawned on me that I wasn't as much one of the guys as I'd thought. Someone must have tipped Tim off. I might have had a beer this morning, I admitted, knowing he wouldn't be thrilled. That's not too bad, he said, offering the breathalyzer again. I took it, resigned, and breathed in. I couldn't predict the outcome, but I knew it wouldn't be favorable. Tim took it back, checking the result. Any trace of a smile vanished from his face. You registered .04, Sam. That's more than a casual drink this morning. Yeah, okay, but I'm nowhere near legally intoxicated. That applies to driving, Sam. But if there's an incident at work and OSHA gets involved, they'll find you've been drinking, and I'll be held responsible. Think about the risk if someone gets hurt. Tim, I assure you, I'm okay. No, you're not, he raised his voice. Your personal life is your own, but when it affects the safety here and puts my team in jeopardy, it's my concern. I need your vehicle keys. One perk of working for Tim was using the company trucks. We took them home to head straight to our sites with all our tools. Reluctantly, I handed him the keys. You're off for today. Here's the plan. Oscar will drive you home and then return to fill in for you. Tomorrow, you'll come to my office instead of the site, and we'll discuss this. I stood there, feeling embarrassed and indignant, rather than remorseful. I felt fine. Being sent home like this was unfair and unnecessary. You know what, Tim, I said, removing my hard hat and pushing it against him. Forget it. I don't need this hassle. Just keep everything. I walked away, got into my truck on the passenger side, and waited for Oscar. He got in silently and drove. We didn't talk during the ride, except when I gave him directions. Arriving at my apartment, I quickly thanked him and stormed inside, slamming the door. I was so angry. I felt perfectly okay and wasn't causing any trouble. Someone must have tipped off Tim. Forget them. I don't need others judging me. Opening my fridge, I saw my beers. Might as well start now, I thought. It's not like I have work tomorrow. I awoke in a room bathed in harsh light, instantly recognizing it as a hospital room, though I had no memory of how I ended up there. Feeling quite unwell, I couldn't argue with the idea that a hospital was probably the best place for me. My return to consciousness seemed to alert the staff, as a nurse entered the room shortly after I woke up. "Ah, you're awake," she said. Confused, I asked, "What happened?" "The doctor will be here shortly to explain," she replied, checking my IV and various monitors before leaving to presumably inform the doctor of my awakening. The room was plain, with an almost white color on the walls and a dry erase board that listed my nurse as Brenda and my doctor as Anderson. I had this image of Dr. Anderson being a suave, wealthy man. So, you can imagine my surprise when a few minutes later, a strikingly attractive female doctor entered, perusing what appeared to be my medical file. She had a distinctly Hispanic look and seemed to be in her 30s. "Good afternoon, Mr. Beckman. It's good to see you awake. How are you feeling?" she asked. I hesitated, my foggy mind trying to reconcile the elegant woman before me with the name Anderson. "Mr. Beckman." Apologizing, I confessed I was expecting someone different based on the name Anderson, maybe an older gentleman, so I was a bit taken aback to see a young, attractive doctor. She smiled. "Thank you. The Anderson name comes from my husband. He's a white guy, not old though. So, how do you feel?" "I'm really exhausted and just feel off," I replied. "What's wrong with me?" "Based on your tests, it looks like you've had quite an excessive amount of alcohol over a prolonged period. You're suffering from alcohol poisoning and severe dehydration. You're lucky your friend called the ambulance when they did, or it might have been too late." "Friend?" I questioned. She flipped through her papers briefly. The ambulance had been called, apparently by someone named Tim Banks. "Of course, Mr. Banks requested to be informed once you regain consciousness, but we need your consent for that. Is that okay with you?" I hesitated, wanting to refuse, but ended up nodding. "Yeah, that's fine. We'll be keeping you here for observation for a couple of days. It's important to monitor you as your body recovers. Do you have any questions, Mr. Beckman?" "I don't think so." After advising me to rest, Dr. Anderson left the room, and I was on my own. I switched on the TV, more for some background sound than anything else, and tried to relax. I felt relatively fine and doubted I needed the full couple of days, but arguing with a competent doctor didn't seem wise. About an hour later, a knock came at the door, and it creaked open slightly. I recognized the voice immediately. "You decent?" It was Tim. "Yeah." He entered with his usual easy stride, stopping a few feet from my bed. "How are you holding up?" "I'm surviving. Whether that's good or bad, I'm still figuring out," I replied, a slight smile playing on my lips. "Yes, I owe you a thank you." "Don't mention it, Sam. Just focus on getting better and returning to work." I wasn't sure I still had a job to return to. "What? You think you're the first person to give me a piece of their mind?" "Sam, we've been friends for years. I'm here to support you through this. I might not agree with all your decisions, and honestly, I don't think she was worth all this trouble. My advice, stand up, sort yourself out, and mend things with your kids. What Paulin did may have ended your marriage and disrupted your family life. Don't let it destroy your future too." Intellectually, I understood his point. I wasn't causing harm to anyone but myself, and maybe, unintentionally, to the girls. In a way, I was probably giving Paulin exactly what she wanted. It was high time to pull myself together. Tim and I continued our conversation for another hour before he left. As the night progressed, I began to feel increasingly unwell. The doctor explained it was my body adjusting to the absence of alcohol. I hadn't had a drink in nearly 24 hours, a first in many months, and my body was reacting to it. I realized how unfortunate my situation had become. I made it through the night and checked out the next day. They gave me several references to counselors, psychiatrists, rehab facilities, and Alcoholics Anonymous. I kept them, although I felt like I might not need them. I believed that Tim's straightforward talk and my hospital stay had set me on the right path. I took a couple more weeks off work. Tim was very supportive, both of my time off and what I had confided in him. I had enough savings to manage financially, and when I returned to work, I did so with renewed energy. The following months passed smoothly. The Martin Luther King Jr. Day celebration at Tim's place was enjoyable, and I didn't touch a single drink. I wasn't sure if I was an alcoholic, but I wasn't eager to find out. I thought I might return to casual drinking eventually, but for the time being, I stuck to non-alcoholic options. I realized that the regular parties were starting to drain me. Initially, I thought they'd be a good way to socialize, but the culture of casual encounters wasn't for me. So, I skipped the Valentine's Day party and treated myself to a hearty steak dinner instead. Everything changed on the 1st of March. It was a Saturday, and I was out running errands. As I approached the grocery store, I saw a woman with dark blonde curls suddenly sit down hard on the sidewalk. She seemed to have tripped over the curb and was now clutching her ankle in pain. The few passers-by didn't seem to notice much. I hurried over to her. "Are you all right?" I asked. It might have seemed like a silly question, but I didn't know what else to say. She looked up at me, her pale blue eyes beginning to well up with tears. I think I've sprained my ankle. We should probably get you to an emergency room. I could call an ambulance, or I can take you myself if you're comfortable with that. I didn't mean to intrude. Intrude? Not at all. You've turned a mundane day into something far more exciting. I'm Sam, by the way. Okay, if you're sure it's no trouble. Pleased to meet you, Sam. I'm Holly. I assisted her to stand, and as she straightened, I couldn't help but notice. Are you expecting? Yes, about 4 months along. We should get moving then, just to be safe. I gently lifted her into my truck, taking a moment to open the door before carefully placing her in the passenger seat. Despite her small stature, carrying a person is always a bit of a challenge. The drive to the hospital's emergency room was brief. After parking, I quickly got a wheelchair from inside and helped Holly from the truck to the chair. Fortunately, there was no wait, so she was immediately taken to a room. I didn't follow her inside, nor was I invited to, so I settled in the waiting area. For 4 hours. To pass the time, I played games and browsed the internet on my phone. I thought she might contact her husband, at which point I'd leave discreetly. But as time passed, no such call was made, and I remained there, and waited some more. Finally, the doors opened and there was Holly, in a wheelchair, pushed by a nurse clad in light blue. I briefly wondered if she was a fan of UNC, or if it was just a coincidence. Holly was chatting with the nurse, mentioning a taxi, but the nurse seemed preoccupied, perhaps knowing I was there waiting. When Holly saw me, her face lit up with a radiant smile. The nurse wheeled her over, and I guided them outside to my truck, helping Holly inside. I expressed my gratitude to the nurse, who was already walking away. Then, I got into the driver's seat. I didn't think you'd still be here. I was thinking of waiting until someone came looking for you, but it seems like no one's coming, so I decided to stay. I don't have anyone who would come. It's just me and my mom, and she's away on a business trip. Have you contacted her? No, she would just get worried and want to come back immediately. I'll manage. Since you've stayed this long, could you possibly give me a lift to my car? I looked at her bandaged right ankle and then met her gaze. Holly, I'm not sure you can drive with that ankle. Oh, Sam, I hadn't thought about that, she said, glancing at her ankle. How about I take you home, and then we can sort out how to get your car? That's really kind of you, Sam, but I've already taken up so much of your time. Well, it's actually been nice, a change from my usual routine. I'm more than willing to help out a bit more, if that's okay with you. Thanks, Sam. She directed me to her house, the one she shared with her mom. I pulled into the driveway, which was empty and parked. Gently, I helped Holly from my truck to her house. As I was about to set her on the couch, she hesitated. Sam, I'm sorry to ask, but I need to use the bathroom. Could you help? I nodded and followed her instructions to the bathroom, helping her to the doorway before stepping out. I waited outside and called for a rideshare. Soon, she called out to me, and I saw she had managed to stand up and get ready. I helped her back to the couch. What's next? She inquired. I need to fetch your car. They don't allow overnight parking where it is. And how will you do that? I've called for a rideshare. Could I have your keys? Sam, this is really above and beyond, but I'm so grateful. She handed me the keys, mentioning the plate number and location of her car, and I stepped outside to wait for my ride. It was supposed to be a brief wait. Pausing at the door, I turned back. Holly, would you like to have dinner with me tonight? I'd love to, Sam, she replied, her smile brightening the room. But I'm not really up for going out. No problem. I thought I'd pick up something while getting your car, and we could have dinner here. As I was leaving, I heard her call out softly, Sam. I looked back to see her expression turn more solemn. Sam, you do remember that I'm expecting, right? I might be a man, Holly, but I'm not without sense, I responded with a light smile. I remember. Is there a reason you're bringing it up? I just wanted to make sure. Sometimes the idea of an instant family can be a lot for some. I wanted to be certain you're aware of what's involved. Holly, we've only just met, and there's plenty for us to learn about each other. But your pregnancy isn't a concern for me. Okay, Sam, I just needed to be sure. I get it. I'll be back as soon as possible. With her car keys in my hand, I waited at the curb for my Uber, which arrived about 10 minutes later. The ride was smooth, and locating her car was easy enough. Opting for Italian food as a safe choice, I picked up dinner from a nearby restaurant. I returned to Holly's place around 7 p.m., carrying the Italian food. Holly was in the same spot, now wearing a dress. I commented on it. I wanted to dress up a bit for our first date. You looked wonderful before, but you've managed to look even better now, I complimented. She smiled at me as I began setting the table. When I came back to help her, she was slowly making her way towards me on crutches. I moved to assist, but she gestured for me to stop. I need to get used to moving on my own. My mom won't be back for a few days. I slid her chair out and she gracefully settled into it. As she did, a hint of her perfume, clearly just put on, reached me. You're looking and smelling wonderful, Holly. Suddenly, I feel a bit unkempt. You look just fine. Honestly, I'm not keen on men who are overly fancy anyway. My comment, what would you think of her if she treated you like this? Comment down below. I will be back with the ending shortly. Hit that sub if you enjoyed this, and I will see you there.